Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. When it comes to retirement accounts, you might not realize that you could invest it in real assets like real estate, precious metals, and more. But with any self-directed IRA, you might be subject to paying a steep tax bill. How do you avoid that tax? Get checkbook control of your own IRA and have the benefit of annual contribution limits 10 times greater than those of an IRA? That and more today on Get Rich Education. Finally, Total Control Financial gives you checkbook control of your 401k and IRA money to invest in real estate. It's time to get your retirement money into your own checking account, but you've got to avoid the little-known tax that you'll pay with any self-directed IRA. Instead, it's time for the QRP. Learn more and get your free copy of the QRP book by text messaging QRP in all capital letters to 72,000. MC Laubscher is the host of the top-rated business and investing podcast, Cash Flow Ninja, and also the president of Producers Wealth. Producers Wealth assists people in creating, protecting, and perpetually multiplying wealth in any economy through creating processes that help them increase their production, provide them with liquidity, passive income generators, and opportunities for enormous growth. Learn more about their time-tested and proven systems at yourownbankingsystem.com. Get Rich Education is brought to you by Ridge Lending Group, Producers Wealth, Norada Real Estate, and Total Control Financial.
You're listening to the show that has created more passive income for people than nearly any show in the world. This is the powerful Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE. From Angeles City, Philippines to Los Angeles, California. I'm Keith Weinhold, and this is Get Rich Education. Thanks for being here, but you're not here for me. You are here for you. Today, you're either going to become excited about what you learn or annoyed that you didn't learn it sooner. But first, you'll probably find yourself incredulous when you find out about this, kind of like I did when I first learned about the QRP. The Qualified Retirement Plan, or sometimes you'll hear Eqrp, which stands for Enhanced Qualified Retirement Plan. I'm coming to you from Milan, Italy today, as I've spent the last 2 weeks touring Italy and Switzerland. So amazing here. Now, since corporate pensions began to disappear decades ago in the U.S., defined contribution plans largely replaced your defined benefit plan, which basically means plans that you fund yourself. You're responsible for it more so than your employer or the government. That means that controlling your own retirement funds has become more integral to your own retirement planning. We're talking about plans like a 401k and an IRA, but most participants in those plans still partly let others control their funds when they're invested in things like mutual funds. And that has resulted in really underwhelming results down the road for would-be retirees. And we can see this clearly now because we've now moved past the first generation of retirees that didn't have a pension, and we have seen the ugly results of people that instead only had 401ks and IRAs, often which are invested in mutual funds, such that 7 or 8 out of 10 would-be retirees cannot afford to retire, and we have the advent of the 82-year-old Walmart greeter. Well, the good news is that you have more options than that, and today will be quite eye-opening for you. Now, I like to break things down to the really simple for you here, so before anyone gets lost in acronym talk, know that IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account. Yes, we really are breaking it down that far. Now, with any self-directed IRA, there's a little-known tax called UBIT, U-B-I-T. But you've got to avoid the little-known tax that you'll pay with any self-directed IRA. Yes, that tax. It's called UBIT. It stands for Unrelated Business Income Tax. It's tax you might have to pay on your capital gains from within your IRA. So let's not learn all about UBIT. Let's just learn how to avoid it. Now, if you have a QRP, again, qualified retirement plan, set up, you avoid the annoying UBIT tax. And also, and this might be difficult to believe the first time that you hear it, it was for me, your annual contribution limits are 10 times what they are for an IRA. And we're going to talk about that more here shortly. I know, and this is the point where you're really thinking, wait, what, really? This exists? Each year, you're allowed to contribute $5,500 to an IRA, and a little more than that if you're over age 50, which all barely seems worth doing. That's not going to move the meter. And yes, you heard me correctly. I said about 10 times that amount is what you may contribute to the QRP. Well, now you might be thinking, well, then why haven't I heard of the QRP? Well, 401k plan administrators or mutual fund companies, they don't have any incentive to tell you that you can invest your money elsewhere, so they may just not let you know about all of your options. In fact, they might even try to tell you that you can't invest these retirement funds in real assets at all when you really could. The QRP gives you the latitude to invest in real estate, precious metals, and a lot of other real assets, which we'll discuss with our guest today. Our guest administers these plans for people like you. You know that real estate is my favorite asset type. You might also remember that 8 episodes ago, I discussed that almost every asset class has experienced a price run-up since, about 2010, but yet gold and silver has not. The time to buy an asset is often when it seems like the asset class is dead and there's no one talking about it. And you never really know when something has bottomed out at its absolute lowest price, but you at least might want to buy when it feels that way. Well, that's basically where precious metals are right now. And I'm not too big on precious metals. The story with them is usually there's no leverage and there's no cash flow. I only have about 1 or 1.5% of my portfolio allocated to them. In fact, we're talking about physical precious metal bullion. Remember as well that physical bullion, it is one of the few assets that has had value for millennia, and in times of crisis, precious metals can be some of the very best money insurance that you can possibly think of. Understand that right now, silver and gold prices are down partly because of a strong dollar. Adding metal to your portfolio today means that you are likely anticipating a weaker dollar in the future. Before we bring in our guest to discuss the QRP, remember to join me just 1 month from today at the longest running and perhaps the most prestigious investment conference in the United States. That's the New Orleans Investment Conference in New Orleans, Louisiana, November 1st through 4th. I'm having a meet and greet with you there. In fact, I'm going to do 2 of them. They will be on 2 different days at 11 a.m. at booth 111, all ones there, so it ought to be easy to remember, where I'd love to meet you, sign your book, maybe even have a photo together. That's 2 meet and greets with you, and it will be both Friday, November 2nd and Sunday, November 4th. You'll also get to tour scores of other investment booths and probably just meet a lot of people for the first time that you've only seen remotely before. Of course, all this is in addition to the speaker presentations about the economy and real asset investing, just continuously ongoing presentations, including from Chris Martenson, Robert Kiyosaki, the real estate guys, Peter Schiff, Doug Casey, and headlined by political commentator Mark Stein. Meet me in New Orleans, and I'd prefer that you get started through getricheducation.com/events, because when you get started there, I'll know to specifically look for you, and the event takes better care of me because they'll know that I attracted you. They will be on 2 different days, again, at 11 a.m. at booth 111, all ones there, so it ought to be easy to remember, where I'd love to meet you, sign your book, and have a photo taken together. That's 2 meet and greets with you, and it will be both Friday, November 2nd and Sunday, November 4th at 11 a.m. on each day. I'd like to meet you. Get started at getricheducation.com/events. Let's talk to our guest about the Qualified Retirement Plan, the QRP, today. And there are a lot of acronyms, so I'm going to make sure that we begin really simply for you here. Today's guest is a best-selling author in alternative retirement investing and money psychology. He's an expert on delivering checkbook control of your retirement money and investing tax-free in non-Wall Street assets like real estate, precious metals, and cryptocurrency. He has written 9 books. He's a 5th-degree black belt. In fact, he founded Yokido. He has owned more than 40 companies. He's been viewed more than 2 million times on Facebook, and he is the host of the Transformation Nation podcast. Interestingly, he was here with you and I back in memorable episode 142, where we talked about the housing crisis and mortgage meltdown of 10 years ago. His mission is to free 1 million people from financial bondage. Welcome back to Get Rich Education, Damion Lupo.
Keith, it's good to be back.
Damion, we need to break things down to the very simple here. I like to take a step back kind of before we go forward. So when people think about investing for retirement, especially in the United States, they basically have a couple different choices, and some use both. One is the 401k. That's where an employee makes contributions to a plan, and they have that money knocked out of their paycheck tax-free, and they're not taxed on that until retirement. Now, in the 401k, and we have like a 403b plan, more for public sector employees that behave similarly, but with the 401k, there's a contribution limit of $18,500 a year or $24,500 a year for those 50 plus, and you cannot access that money until you're between age 59 and a half and 70 and a half if you want to access it penalty free. When you do withdraw money at those ages, you must pay tax then. And then the other sort of mainstream alternative to the 401k is the IRA, and that's a plan that's not so much through your employer. And there are 2 different types of IRAs. There's a Roth IRA, where the short story is you pay tax now and not later, or a traditional IRA, where your tax is deferred until retirement, sort of like it was in the 401k. In an IRA, you can only contribute $5,500 a year to that, $6,500 a year if you're 50 or older. And again, you cannot access those funds until you're older. I think the historical consumer credit mindset around the 401ks and the IRAs, which I just briefly described, are that, well, this is something good. I'm going to have something in my retirement. I'm going to save for a rainy day. But there really are 2 problems with the 401k and the IRA to initiated people that care about their finances. Number 1 is you cannot receive a financial benefit until you're older. We had Ted Benna, the founder of the 401k here, and he and I were talking about how 401ks were actually originally called salary reduction plans when they were rolled out mainstream in the early 80s, and reducing your salary is still principally what they do during all your working years. And the second problem with the 401k or the IRA to an initiated person is that you have limited investment options, often just in mutual funds. So what are your thoughts there?
I think you hit on a whole bunch of really important things. One of them, if you're using an IRA, for example, to hit that one, and you contribute your $5,500 your limit over 20 years, you're not really going to get rich. If you have a rainy day, you're going to be able to afford an umbrella, and that's about it. It's just not going to, you're going to get old. You're not going to get rich. That's one of the first problems with the IRA. And when you shift over to the 401k space, there's a lot more money that you can put into it, which is valuable. The question is, this old adage that we've heard from Wall Street, or just in general, that you want to have money taxed down the road when you're in a lower tax bracket. So put it all away today. And as Ted said, it was a salary reduction plan. You get your salary. And look, people buy into this. The problem is, why would you want to plan to be poor when you retire? I mean, why would you want to plan to be in a lower tax bracket? And that's what the marketing is telling us. That's what these systems are telling us for one primary reason. And I think it's why you and I do what we do, to teach people how to shift assets into things like real estate, because it's outside of Wall Street. Wall Street wants you to put as much money as possible into their system, into their casino, to do investing so that they make fees. If you think a little bit deeper about this stuff and you can say, okay, I'm going to be richer, I'm going to be rich and free when I'm retired, that means you're probably going to be making a lot more income than you are now, which means you're going to be in a higher tax bracket. So how do you fix that? You fix that with something that came into existence years back called the Roth, and you mentioned it with the IRA.
Yeah.
What a lot of people don't realize is that the 401k has a Roth option inside of it, but most employers don't have that available. They just have like a 401k. So people go, okay, I got 401k or an IRA. And on the alternative world, which is what the world you and I live in, and people that are listening are thinking, okay, I like real estate, but all my money's tied up in my 401k. There's something different called the EQRP. And what that is, it's like your own 401k that you get to invest in real estate. And people go, well, that's kind of cool, except I can do that with my IRA. You can kind of do it with an IRA. But the biggest problem, and this is, pay really close attention to this right now, guys, the IRA that y'all are using to invest in real estate, if you've started doing that, there's a sneaky little tax called UBIT. And basically, if you're investing in like an apartment or you go buy a rental house and that thing's profitable and you've got some debt on there, you're going to pay about a 35% tax on those profits when you end up selling those assets, when you make profits. That is a huge problem that most people don't realize is coming. And the coolest part is the EQRP actually exempts you out of that. So what bottom line here is that you're able to use a retirement vehicle, the EQRP, and buy real estate and pay no taxes whatsoever because you can use the Roth piece of it. And so I probably just buried you in acronyms. You're like, wait, Roth, QRP, 401k, like all these things. The ultimate reality here is there's a way to use these retirement vehicles, specifically the EQRP, and use the Roth piece of it so that you don't pay taxes and you own real assets. You own that real estate. This is unconventional, and most people have never heard about it, Keith. They've only heard about what Wall Street wanted to tell them about.
Yeah, well, I just want to stay in backed up mode a bit longer here, Damion. A lot of people, much of their life, they don't realize that investments should produce income for you both now and all of your life. And when they come to this realization, oftentimes they want to get money out of their retirement accounts. They want to get money out of their 401ks or the IRAs, but they have a sticking point because in order to do that prior to retirement age, they need to pay a 10% penalty and any tax. But the EQRP, which stands for Enhanced Qualified Retirement Plan, really helps to solve this problem.
It does. There's a number of interesting things about it that you can tap into. Let's say you're 35, 40 years old and you start building up your money inside of it and you go, well, I don't want to wait until I'm 60. You can actually do something called periodic payments, which is one way to get money out. And it basically just means you say, all right, I'm going to be alive the next 30, 40 years, and you get to cut the distributions and there's no penalty. So you can start pulling money out before 59 and a half, and you get to do it the rest of your life. So that's one way to do it. Another way is that unlike IRAs, the 401ks sometimes have this put in there, but the EQRP always has it in. It's called a $50,000 line of credit, which means you can pull $50,000 out today, invest in a piece of real estate that's paying you today, and you're also putting money back into your retirement funds for down the road. So you get paid today and down the road. So there's ways to actually utilize your retirement accounts so you can feed yourself today and in the future. Most people don't know that that's an option, and it's certainly not an option with an IRA.
Well, some people get excited when they learn that there is such thing as a self-directed IRA as an alternative, because with a self-directed IRA, that opens you up as to where you can invest in real assets. And you've already touched on it somewhat, but if you just break down more slowly, why someone would have an advantage using an EQRP rather than a self-directed IRA or 401k?
The biggest difference, specifically when we're talking about real estate, is that banks will loan you money and it's fairly easy to get debt. If you buy a piece of real estate and you use a self-directed IRA, because you're going to use that debt to buy the property, you're going to end up paying a tax on your profits, even though it's inside the IRA. That is a huge problem if you're going to give away a third of your profits to this sneaky tax.
Because you pay a tax on the part of your gain that was leveraged with that debt with a self-directed IRA.
That's right. If you had 80% of your purchase price being debt and the 20% was money from your IRA, then 80% of your profits are subject to this tax. And now there are some offsets if you have depreciation and things, but here's the bottom line. You end up selling that property or you're a partner in an apartment deal. Properties get sold. When they get sold, you get hurt. And that is a huge problem with the IRA. It doesn't exist in the EQRP. It's exempt. So that's why the EQRP is so much more powerful, because you're using a different set of rules. And for whatever reason, the IRS has said this is exempt and the IRAs are not.
That's right. So the QRP is an IRS-approved part of ERISA, the tax code that was established back in the 1970s. So you've introduced an example here, Damion, of where you put a $20,000 down payment on a $100,000 property and you borrow $80K, and the leverage gain is exempt from that tax in an EQRP, where it is not exempt from that tax, and that tax would need to be payable in a self-directed IRA.
That's right. What we see a lot right now, it's very popular, is people that are buying a house, that $100,000 house, and ultimately, let's say they sell the house for $200,000. And they had $20,000 from their retirement account. 80% of that $100,000 is subject to this tax. So $80,000 of profit is subject to tax. That's going to be about 35%. So you're literally going to write a check to the government for $30,000 out of pocket if you have this done within an IRA. Whereas if it was the EQRP, you get to keep all $100,000 in profit in your plan and invest it again. It's like a night and day difference. It's crazy but most people don't know about this until they get a surprise tax bill.
Yeah, this is awesome news. This is going to be an epiphany to an awful lot of people with the EQRP. Now, sticking with this example and putting a $20,000 down payment on a $100,000 property, hopefully one is buying that for cash flow. And conventionally, in a retirement plan, you're not able to realize any immediate benefit. So how does the EQRP work with a cash flowing property? Can one take that cash and get benefit from it today, monthly?
The way that you would get benefit from it today would be after you did your first deal, your $20,000 turned into $120,000. At that point, you'd be able to take some of that money. You could borrow up to $50,000 as a personal loan and then invest that in a property that you were getting cash flow from. So you're basically using your EQRP as a starting place, as a way to build up a pile of cash. And realistically, you could do that in a very short period of time. So you're not waiting 20 or 30 years. That's because you can't have a direct benefit cash flow out of your plan today if you're under 59.5. But you could certainly take some of that money, take it as a personal loan, and then go buy another property that was going to give you that monthly cash flow.
Okay, you could use the leverage growth to basically pull a piece out and leverage more property.
That's exactly right. That's a perfect example.
So that's how we could use the EQRP with real estate. What can an EQRP user invest in other than real estate?
So it's really interesting how the IRS works, and people kind of might laugh about this. They don't tell you what you can necessarily invest in. They say, here are the 12 things you can't invest in. So people invest in, including me, in things like precious metals, physical precious metals. You can't take possession of those in an IRA. You can actually have those shipped to you because you're the trustee of your EQRP. So that means that you get to use, if you want, deferred money to buy metals. So basically the government's subsidizing 35%-ish of your purchase, and then you get to take possession. That's kind of an amazing thing that you can take and hold these. It's one of the only things in the world that doesn't have a counterparty risk, somebody that can screw up your deal, like you actually have total control of it. So metals are a big part of it. You can invest in tax liens or notes, private placement memorandums. You can do, like, there's a million things you can invest in. Apartments are pretty popular now too, where people are able to invest in a part of an apartment. And again, this is where a lot of people are using IRAs to invest in an apartment deal. And because there's leverage, they're getting hit with this tax. But if you use the EQRP to invest in an apartment as one of the partners, you're not going to be subject to that tax. So almost anything you can imagine, you can invest in. It's other than things like wine and collectible coins, perhaps. There's a few things that are not allowed. Almost anything else is allowed. Cryptocurrencies are also allowed.
It is really quite wide open. You can also invest in vacant land, mobile home parks, notes, oil and gas, flips, options, franchises. You really have a lot of possibilities open to you with the EQRP. I'm going to ask Damion some more about that. You're listening to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for a roadmap to financial freedom? If so, we have a solution for you. Norada Real Estate is offering a limited number of free strategy sessions to help you get out of the rat race. Learn how you can create wealth and build monthly passive income. To set up a time with one of our knowledgeable investment counselors, simply go to noradarealestate.com. That's NORADA realestate.com.
For a real estate investor like you seeking an income property loan, go to Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. Over the years, you've heard President Chaley Ridge generously devote her time to you here on the show as a guest. Ridge provides investment property loans in most U.S. states, and you're going to find out how they've helped more people realize their dreams of real estate financial freedom than any other mortgage lender in the entire nation when you get started at ridgelendinggroup.com.
This is David Campbell from Hassle-Free Cash Flow Investing. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, and don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. We're talking with Damion Lupo about the Eqrp, the Enhanced Qualified Retirement Plan. Damion, you have a case study, a number of them, with how this has been put into practice. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Keith, I had some folks that came up to me at a recent real estate training. They came up and they said, "Hey, we've got a property that our IRA, our self-directed IRA, purchased, and we're selling it. And our accountant told us we're going to owe $25,000. We literally made $58,000 in profit off the sale, and we've got to pay like $25,000 in this UBIT tax that we didn't even know about." And I said, "Well, you realize you can roll that asset from your IRA into an EQRP?" And they said, "What does that mean?" And I said, "It's a rollover. Instead of cash, you can actually roll assets. It's called an in-kind rollover. And once it's in the EQRP, it's now exempt from that UBIT tax. So when you sell it and you have that profit, you're not writing a check for $25,000. You're writing a check for $0." And they said, "We don't have to pay this $25,000." And I said, "Not unless you want to." And they said, "Give us the application." And so it was really simple. Instead of them having about $33,000 left, they have $58,000 in their EQRP today. And it was simply about doing an in-kind rollover. Very, very simple. Took about 2 weeks to do, and they got to keep all their money, and they will forever with all their real estate deals.
That's fantastic. Sometimes I don't mind paying an extra $25K for something in life because I usually get some benefit out of that, but I don't know what benefit I directly get from sending an extra $25K to the IRS other than maybe honesty.
Right. And I think that might be a stretch with you could feel good maybe, but then you realize your account's a little light. So I'm with you.
Yeah. Now, the EQRP has a little known benefit as well, and that is one of better creditor protection compared to similar plans. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so one of the things that has come up, the ERISA Act back in the 70s set up 401ks, and it was set up and it was structured so that it's for plans that have employees. So if you work at a big company, whether it's Amazon or General Electric, there's protections there, and that just means that if you ever get sued, really nobody can get to your retirement money. The problem is when you have these individual plans like a solo 401k that's out there, they're not covered by ERISA because there's no employees. They look at a single member and it's effectively disregarded. So that means that you are a target. If you've got a whole bunch of money, you save up your whole life and you've got money in there and somebody sues you, it may be that a judge says, you don't need $3 million. You only need $500,000. And all of a sudden, the majority of your working life's efforts are vaporized. So there's got to be another way. There's something different a way to protect your stuff. And that's what the EQRP does because of the way that we've built it. It's our registered, trademark, patented process of building something that's not just a cookie cutter commodity. It's really, truly something special. And it does provide additional legal protections. I've never heard of anyone ever actually having their EQRP sued or having assets taken because it's virtually impossible. Now, cows could fly over. There's possibilities where the unicorns show up, but I've never seen it happen. And based on our current legal system, I don't see that that's really a threat. So it's something to consider because you're more likely to have a lawsuit in your lifetime than you are these major medical incidents. And so we need to be careful about the lawsuits and the legal implications and really whether your stuff's protected.
Earlier, I discussed the contribution limits of both the 401k and the IRA, about $18K per year for a 401k participant and $5,000 or $6,000 a year for an IRA participant. What are the contribution limits with the EQRP versus the self-directed IRA?
It's literally a 10x factor. So there's a guy that wrote a book called 10x Rule, and this is a great 10x example. You can put $55,000 into your EQRP each year. And so if you happen to have a spouse, between the two of you, there's a potential for $110,000 per year. And it can be deferred or it can be Roth, which is the after tax where it grows tax-free and you get to take it out tax-free. So it's literally 10 times more, $55,000 per person per year. And so really it's a choice of, do you want to have an itty bitty amount that makes you old and broke, or do you want to have something that can really grow? And that's just the contributions. It's virtually unlimited in terms of how much you can roll over if you've got old 401ks or 403bs, government plans, 457s, even the thrift savings plan, government workers. Like my dad had one of those, and that's eligible to roll into the EQRP as well. The only thing you can't roll in is that you're restricted from is a Roth IRA. That's literally the one thing the IRS has said, nope, you can't roll this in. Why? I have no idea. But it's just the way it is. Everything else you can roll in. And so you can take control and consolidate and simplify your life.
So just to make it real clear, so you can roll over a retirement plan into the QRP tax-free and penalty-free. And the included retirement plans that you can roll into the QRP are traditional IRA, 401k funds, 403b funds, 457 funds, or thrift savings plan funds.
That's it. Almost anything you can imagine. Literally, it's kind of like what you can invest in. The IRS says, here's what you can't do. You can't roll a Roth IRA, but everything else is okay.
Yeah. Well, you facilitate this and you hold people's hand and you help walk them through setting up their EQRP and then for any ongoing questions as well. So just kind of, Damion, with your experience in doing that, sort of who is the EQRP for and who is it not for?
People will ask that, and I'll say this is for somebody that's incredibly self-responsible, that says, I want a life that I'm designing that's not by default. I don't want to smoke a bunch of hopium my entire life, and that's what my results is going to be based on. So it's somebody that says, I want to invest in real estate. I want to use my money. I want to control it and choose where it's going. And I'm not going to just hand it over and think maybe I'll wake up one day with a bunch of money. So if you've got that mentality, that's the core. It's more about that than anything else. And it's, do you trust yourself? A lot of times people that don't use it, it's because they simply don't trust their ability to make good choices. And it's because they're not willing to spend the time educating themselves, listening to the right podcasts, going to the right seminars. And so if you're comfortable with Wall Street, then you don't want an EQRP. If you don't want to spend any time taking responsibility, absolutely this is the wrong thing for you. But if you think that you're going to take better care of your money than anybody else, this is probably something for you to look at, because truly this gives you absolute control over your financial future and your money.
You've got to be a responsible person to participate because you now will have checkbook control and an awful lot of autonomy over your retirement money. Oftentimes with a self-directed IRA, there is a custodian involved as sort of an intermediary and to make sure that a participant is in compliance. Is there a custodian with the QRP?
Good question. There's a trustee, which is really acting as the same thing. The trustee is you. So you can make the trustee somebody else about 99 to 100% of the time. When you set up your EQRP, you would be your trustee. Basically, that means that you make all the decisions and you wear all the different hats. So it's not any more complicated than you following the rules. And I think that that's one of the things that sometimes people like about having a custodian. The reality, though, is a custodian is sort of limited in what they're going to do. They're definitely going to fee you quite a lot, and they're going to create friction. We know these things for sure. What we don't know is if they add the kind of value that they're charging for. I've seen it the opposite more often than not. And then occasionally I see a custodian that does a really great job. So it's up to you whether you want to put the time and effort into being in charge of your money. And that's what you are as a trustee. There is no custodian. There's no delays. There's also nobody that's going to keep you from blowing off your feet. So you've got to keep that in mind. And I say that kind of, Keith, to push away the people that say, well, I don't think I'd make good decisions. Maybe this isn't for you. I mean, truly, honestly, you are in control. And so you could hit the red button and lose some appendages if you're not careful. So you've got to be willing to take control and take responsibility.
Is this going to work for people in both the United States and Canada?
This actually works for anybody that has any type of U.S. income, or we have clients that are outside of the U.S., whether you're an American citizen or not, because the 401k code was based on somebody it's effectively for an employee in the United States. And you can have foreign folks that have profit sharing plans. They may work for a big company. There's nothing that excludes them from having their own if they've got U.S. income. So if you happen to be from Canada or Australia and you want to do some type of business in the U.S. and then shield some of that income, then it's something you definitely want to have a tax advisor involved in that conversation, because you've got tax treaty rules, you've got all sorts of stuff to look at. But we have people all over the planet that have set up plans.
Damion, right now, I think our listeners are either really delighted with this and happy it exists, or they're annoyed because they did not find out about this sooner. Could you tell us about the QRP fees, both setup fees and any ongoing fees?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is fixed. There's this thing called AUM, and that's basically, it's called assets under management. Custodians and Wall Street advisors, the things tend to say we want to have all your money and we charge you just a percentage of it, like 1 or 2%. We have a fixed fee to set up. We have a fixed annual fee to keep your plan in compliance, to keep your filings done. Anytime you change your plan, it's all part of that. So it's fixed both times. And so it's predictable. I think that that's the important thing, that it's not going to be something you wonder, okay, what else are they going to get me with? What else am I going to do that's going to be a surprise and I'm going to have to write another check? It's literally once up front and it's once annually. And that covers whatever you need from us. And it covers all of your filings. It covers everything that needs to take place for you to have your plan.
I know people that have set up an EQRP with Damion, and they've actually told me that there is less red tape to go through when you set one up than there is with a self-directed IRA.
It's fascinating how people's experience is. There's a roller coaster people go on. One, first thing they say is, I've never heard of this. It seems too good to be true.
Right.
And then the next phase is after they realize, wow, this has been around for 40 years, they get really mad that they didn't set it up a while ago. And then the third phase, they say, give me this now. And once they set it up, they're telling everybody, you guys can't believe what just happened. I got rid of my self-directed IRA. I've got control. And it's stunning to them that this was sitting like literally right in front of them and it was in plain sight and they didn't know. And now they've got this control. So it's sort of an interesting process to, if you're going through any of those phases, that's very, very normal. I see it in just about everybody that has ever become a client or is going through this space because it's consistent. It's just something that it's almost hard to believe and it feels like it's too good to be true. And then the folks that came to you and said they set it up and now they've got this checkbook and now they invest fast and they invest in what they want and they're not arguing with the custodian or a bank or anything else. It's very, very simple the way that we do it.
If one initiates this to get it set up right away, how soon can they have the checkbook control of their money?
The fastest I would say is literally 3 days where they had their checkbook and they had money in it. The typical is about 10 to 14 days between the time somebody says, I want this, and the time that they've moved money over from their current custodians or their 401ks. That's about how long it takes. The craziest thing is we've got some of the state governments that are bankrupt and they are the slowest at giving people their money. If everybody said we want our money, they literally don't have it. So they're really, really reluctant. And that goes to show you that it's important for you to start taking control and getting your money out of those systems because eventually it's going to be like a bank run, but it'll be a pension run. And California is not going to have the money. New York's not going to have the money. So keep that in mind. I want to be really clear. There are some friction points getting your money out of the hands of these institutions that think it's their money. I like to warn people now. I don't say it's going to be easy to get the money out. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to make our process very easy. And then when you ask for it, just be prepared because they think that your money is their money and they don't want to give it back. And you got to tell them, hey, this is my freaking money. Give it to me. They
are going to dig their claws in. Damion, is there any maybe question that I didn't ask you about the EQRP that I should have asked you?
Something just dawned on me, and a lot of people have been doing this. So part of my backstory when I started out in real estate, I spent about $1 million. It was actually a little bit more on seminars and coaches and mentors. And that's because I really believe in education. And I believe that the money you put in, the time you put into education, not like college. I'm talking about the actual real life, real asset, this type of stuff. When you invest in yourself, that return is going to be greater than anything you'll ever put your dollars into. So people will say, well, I would love to do this training or this seminar or this mentoring, but I don't have any money. And I say, well, do you have money in your 401k or IRA? And they say, yes. And I say, great. You've got up to $50,000 in all likelihood. You could go and invest in yourself with your education by borrowing it from your plan. And they say, wow, so I can get started. I don't have to wait. And I say, yeah. And the reality is if you don't get the education from people that have been there and done that, you're going to write $50,000 checks, $100,000 checks for the mistakes you make. So the smart thing to do by the smart investor is to find people that have been there and done that, the best in the world, and leverage off of their stuff. It's other people's experience, OPE. And you can use your retirement money to do this. And that is a huge hack that a lot of people haven't even thought about.
You can't repossess an education. Damion Lupo, how can someone learn more about the EQRP?
Guys, if you want to learn about this right now, text the word QRP, all caps, QRP to 72,000. You'll get an immediate response and I'll send you a copy of the book. That's the next step, QRP to 72,000 right on your phone right now.
Damion Lupo, it's been great having you here. I'm sure this has been eye-opening for an awful lot of listeners. Thanks so much for coming on to the show.
Thanks, Keith. It's been awesome.
Well, that latitude that you have with your QRP investment choices are that you can invest in virtually anything. Some of the very few things excluded are things like numismatic coins, fine wines, and 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle baseball cards. If you have funds in a retirement account, this might be one of the most important things you've learned about here. In fact, the QRP, it aligns so much with our perspective here at Get Rich Education of what do you already have right now that you can invest right now that you didn't even realize was investable. Rather than deferring life or waiting until some future far-off date until you accumulate enough liquidity to go buy your next property, you might be too equity heavy in other properties. When you learn that home equity is unsafe, illiquid, and its rate of return is always zero, and then you realize that something like a cash out refi in order to finance a new purchase means that when you do that, your equity is not lost, it's merely transferred, and you're now leveraging more property. Well, you might realize that not doing that was only deferring your life and deferring opportunity. So this is what I mean by evaluating what you have right now. That's more powerful than projecting what you might have to work with someday. And I think in the same vein, it can be largely said about the QRP, because you might have the potential to do more right now with what you are already sitting on. Thanks to Damion Lupo, it sure has been eye-opening today. Coming up on the show, Fox News and CNN and MSNBC contributor Kristen Tate will join us. The return of Rich Dad real estate advisor Ken McElroy. And we're also, after that, going to talk to the guest that has been responsible for getting you started with your first real estate investment more than any other person in the history of the show here. On the QRP, if I would have known about this sooner, I might have been able to exit the rat race even earlier than I did. If you've got retirement funds that feel trapped and you want to get total control or just learn more about Total Control Financial and get the free QRP book, do that by texting QRP in all capital letters to 72000. Until next week, when I'll be back to help you build your wealth, I'm Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
Ranked by Forbes as one of the fastest growing cities, Orlando, Florida has a big and diverse economy, yet still features affordable rental properties that cash flow. Our boots on the ground turnkey provider, Greg Bond, wrote a special report to help you discover the amazing market of Orlando. Request your free copy today. Visit GetRichEducation.com/Orlando. That's GetRichEducation.com/Orlando.
71% of Americans aren't saving enough for retirement. It's going to get worse as people live longer, and you need to start thinking differently. But you can't lose your time. Real estate is the investment vehicle that's made more ordinary people wealthy than anything else. Keith Weinhold of Get Rich Education is host of one of America's top investing shows, Disrupting Wall Street. He's an international best-selling author, a writer for Rich Dad Advisors, and has been an active income property investor since 2002. He has created thousands in passive monthly income for countless followers, and now he has a free book, The 7 Principles for Creating Wealth in Your Life. Get your copy now at GetRichEducation.com/book. That's GetRichEducation.com/book. Because invest in what produces income for you now and later. Sign up now at GetRichEducation.com/book.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.